She leaned over the fence with that teasing smile and said, "I heard you were strong, show me tonight." I thought she was joking. I had no idea that one playful challenge would change everything between us. The sun was dipping low when I decided to finally fix the old wooden fence in my backyard. It had been leaning awkwardly for weeks, and honestly, I needed the distraction after another long day at work. The evening air carried the sweet scent of jasmine from somewhere nearby, mixing with the crisp freshness that only comes right before nightfall. As I lifted one of the heavier panels into place, I heard her voice, smooth, warm, and teasing, float across the fence. "I heard you were strong, Evan, show me tonight." I froze mid-motion, caught off guard by both her words and the playful lilt in her tone. I turned to see Clara, my neighbor, leaning casually on her side of the fence. She was wearing a light summer dress, pale blue with small white patterns, and the soft breeze toyed with the loose strands of her hair. There was that unmistakable spark in her eyes, the kind that made it hard to tell where the teasing ended and something more curious began. I laughed lightly, setting the panel down. "Is that your way of asking for help, or just a performance review?" She tilted her head, smile widening. "Maybe both. I like to keep things interesting around here." It wasn't the first time Clara and I had exchanged small talk, but this felt different. There was an ease to her teasing, and yet underneath it, a quiet awareness neither of us said aloud. The age difference between us was obvious, her presence carried a kind of self-assured grace that comes with life experience. But instead of making things awkward, it drew me in. I wiped the dust off my hands, suddenly more aware of the sweat on my forearms than I cared to admit. "Well," I said, feigning confidence, "you picked the right night to watch greatness in action." She laughed softly, a low, melodic sound that lingered in the air. For a moment, the entire world narrowed to the fence between us, her smile, and the golden light brushing across her face as the sun sank lower. She didn't stay long, just long enough to leave me wondering. As she walked back toward her garden, the fading light caught the curve of her shoulders and the sway of her dress. And as I picked up the tools again, I caught myself smiling, my heartbeat just a little faster than before. Something about that playful challenge felt like the beginning of something I didn't yet have a name for. Later that evening, the house was quiet. I just finished showering, the cool night breeze drifting in through the open window. I wasn't expecting company, least of all from her. Then came a knock. 3 gentle taps. Not hurried, not uncertain, but deliberate. When I opened the door, Clara was standing there. Her hair was tied back loosely, a few strands framing her face. She was dressed casually, in a soft cream cardigan over a fitted top and jeans, but she carried herself with the same quiet confidence that had caught my attention earlier. In her hands, she held the leg of a wooden chair, slightly splintered at the joint. "I broke this," she said with a sheepish smile. "And I figured, since you're apparently strong, maybe you could help me fix it." The teasing was there again, but it wasn't sharp, it was warmer this time, laced with something gentler. A hint of trust, maybe. I laughed softly. "You know, most people call a handyman for this." She raised an eyebrow. "And missed the chance to see the neighborhood's strongest man at work?" "Not a chance." I stepped aside, and she walked in. Her home had this cozy warmth to it, soft lighting, shelves lined with books, the faint scent of lavender drifting from somewhere deeper inside. A record was playing softly, some old jazz tune that filled the spaces between our words. We set the broken chair down in the living room. I knelt beside it, examining the damage, while she hovered nearby, arms folded loosely, watching me with an amused glint in her eyes. Our fingers brushed when she handed me the screwdriver. Just a light touch, but enough to send a small spark up my arm. She didn't pull away too quickly either. "You're surprisingly good at this," she said after a moment. "I've had practice. My college apartment furniture was a survival exercise." She laughed quietly, the sound soft and unguarded. It filled the room in a way that made it feel less like a neighbor's house and more like a space I'd known for years. As I tightened the screws, I could feel her gaze on me. Not intense, but steady. Curious. Something had shifted between us, not dramatically, but undeniably. What had started as teasing across the fence was turning into something slower, deeper, like the opening notes of a song that neither of us had expected to hear tonight. I thought I'd just fix the chair, say goodnight, and head home. But somehow, neither of us seemed in any rush. The record kept spinning softly in the background, filling the living room with mellow jazz, and the warm light from the corner lamp cast a golden glow across the space. Clara perched gracefully on the sofa, legs tucked loosely to the side, while I sat cross-legged on the floor with the chair between us. She watched me work with a kind of relaxed curiosity, occasionally sipping from a mug of tea she'd made for us. "You're surprisingly handy," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I've had a lot of broken furniture in my life," I replied with a grin. "Mostly from moving around too much." Something shifted in her expression then, softening. She rested the mug on her knee, fingers curling gently around it. "I get that," she said quietly. "This house, it's the longest I've stayed anywhere in years." Her tone wasn't teasing anymore. It was thoughtful. A little wistful. I set the screwdriver down and leaned back against the coffee table. "Why'd you stay this time?" She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing how much to share. Finally, she exhaled slowly. "Because for once, I wanted stillness. After my divorce, everything felt loud. Busy. Like I was constantly moving just to avoid feeling anything. Here, it's quiet. Too quiet sometimes." Her honesty caught me off guard, not because of what she said, but because of how easily it came out. Like she'd been holding that weight for a while, waiting for someone who'd actually listen. I nodded slowly. "I get that. When I moved here, I told myself it was for a fresh start. But honestly, I've mostly just kept to myself. Guess that's my version of quiet." She smiled faintly, a little sad, a little warm. "Seems like we're both hiding in our quiet corners." For a while, we just sat there, me on the floor, her on the sofa, sharing this soft, unspoken understanding. The chair was fixed, but neither of us mentioned it. Her gaze lingered on me a moment longer than before. Not romantic exactly, but undeniably personal. The kind of look that makes your heartbeat slow down and speed up at the same time. Something about the night was changing. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But deeply. I was tightening the last screw on the chair when the first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Clara glanced toward the window, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Looks like we've got company," she said softly. Outside, the evening had turned dusky and moody, the sky gathering heavy clouds like a blanket. A few fat raindrops splattered against the glass, then, almost suddenly, the storm arrived in full, wind whistling through the trees, rain pelting the windows, thunder echoing in the distance. Before either of us could comment, the lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The house fell into darkness. For a second, all I could hear was the rush of the rain and our soft, surprised laughter. "Well," she murmured, "I guess we're stuck with each other for a bit." She disappeared briefly into the hallway and returned with a handful of candles. One by one, she lit them, scattering warm pools of golden light across the living room. The sudden shift in atmosphere was almost cinematic, the storm outside, the dim candlelight, the soft jazz still faintly playing from an old battery-powered speaker. She motioned for me to stay. Might as well wait it out together. "I'll make us some tea." I watched her move through the flickering light, calm, unhurried, like this wasn't an inconvenience but something strangely welcome. The smell of rain drifted through the slightly open window, mixing with the lavender in the room. She returned with 2 steaming mugs and draped a thick knit blanket across the floor near the coffee table. We sat side by side, our shoulders occasionally brushing when we reached for our cups. The conversation was easy at first, jokes about the storm, shared stories from childhood, but slowly, as the thunder softened to a distant murmur, the energy between us changed. There was a quiet closeness neither of us needed to name. At one point, she leaned over to refill my cup, her arm brushing against mine. It wasn't deliberate, but it wasn't exactly accidental either. Her touch was warm against my skin, and for a moment, my breath caught. The flicker of the candlelight made her eyes shine softly. She met my gaze briefly, just long enough for something unspoken to pass between us. We didn't move closer. We didn't have to. The air was already charged, like the storm outside had found its echo between us. The storm eventually softened to a gentle rain, tapping steadily against the windows like a quiet rhythm. The candles were burning low, their golden light flickering lazily across the walls. Time had slowed down inside that living room, stretching each moment until it felt suspended between night and morning. We'd been talking for what felt like hours, about nothing and everything. Childhood memories, odd habits, half-forgotten dreams. The kind of conversation that sneaks up on you and makes you realize how comfortable you've become with someone. Clara sat cross-legged on the blanket beside me, her cardigan slipped off her shoulders, revealing the delicate curve of her collarbone in the dim light. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and glanced at me, not with teasing now, but with a softness that made my chest tighten. There was a lull in the conversation. Neither of us rushed to fill it. It wasn't awkward. It was loaded. She rested one hand near mine on the blanket. Close enough that if either of us shifted even slightly, our fingers would touch. I became intensely aware of that small space between us, the warm air, the scent of her lavender candle, the quiet hush of the rain. I don't know why, but I whispered, "You look peaceful." Her eyes met mine, searching. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, in a voice softer than I'd ever heard from her, she replied, "I haven't felt peaceful in a long time." The weight of her honesty hung gently between us. She didn't look away, and neither did I. Almost without thinking, she reached out to brush a damp lock of hair from my forehead. Her fingertips were warm and careful, tracing lightly across my skin. The touch was brief but electric, sending a pulse through my chest. For a heartbeat, we were so close I could feel her breath mingling with mine. Her eyes flickered down, just for a second, then back up to meet my gaze. I could have leaned in. She could have too. But neither of us did. And somehow, that made the moment even more powerful. Instead, she slowly lowered her hand, letting it rest near mine again. My heart was pounding, not from anything that happened, but from everything that almost did. The storm outside was fading, but inside, something deeper had quietly ignited. Somewhere between the fading storm and the quiet rhythm of our conversation, night turned into morning. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the world outside washed clean and still. Inside, the candles had burned down to small pools of wax, and the soft gray light of dawn crept gently through the curtains. Neither of us had planned to stay up all night, but that's exactly what happened. We didn't move from the living room floor. Wrapped in the blanket, sitting close but never crossing that invisible line, we drifted between laughter and gentle silences. It wasn't about time anymore. It was about presence. Clara sat with her knees drawn up, arms resting loosely around them. Her hair had fallen loose during the night, soft waves framing her tired but peaceful face. She looked different in the morning light, less guarded, almost younger, as if the night had quietly stripped away the layers she usually carried. I stretched and exhaled, glancing toward the pale sky through her window. I didn't realize it was morning already. She smiled softly, following my gaze. Me neither. I can't remember the last time I stayed up like this. Not since. Her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish. I shifted to face her, resting my forearm casually on my knee. "I'm glad I was here," I said. It came out quietly but honest. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. There wasn't teasing now. No playful barrier. Just warmth and something unspoken but real. Thank you, she said finally. Her voice carried a kind of softness I hadn't heard before. Not just for fixing a chair, for tonight. For listening. For not making it feel complicated. Her words landed gently, but they lingered. I felt my chest tighten, not out of confusion, but because I understood exactly what she meant. At the doorway, as I finally stood to leave, she followed me, the morning breeze slipping softly through the hallway. She reached out and touched my forearm lightly. Her thumb brushed against my skin in a slow, absent motion, an instinctive gesture that said more than words could. "Evan," she said quietly, "I'm glad it was you." I didn't have a perfect response. I just nodded, holding her gaze for a heartbeat longer than usual. And as I stepped outside into the cool, bright morning, I realized something had shifted permanently between us. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, undeniable way, like dawn itself. The following days moved quietly, but everything felt subtly different. Mornings didn't just mean the usual routine anymore. Now, when I stepped into my backyard, I caught myself glancing toward the fence, half expecting to hear her voice float over again. And then, one late afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to dip behind the rooftops, it happened. "Hey, strong man." Her voice carried easily across the fence, playful and warm, the way it had that first evening, but this time, something in it felt different. Less teasing for show, more like an inside joke only we shared. I turned, grinning despite myself. There she was, Clara, leaning against the fence post, her hair loosely tied back, the sunset turning her features golden. She held a cardboard box in her arms. "I've got another emergency for you tonight," she said dramatically, though the smile on her face gave her away. I walked closer, resting my hands on the fence. "What is it this time? Another broken chair? A collapsing empire?" She laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that reached her eyes. "Worse. I can't get this ridiculously heavy box up to the attic. I'd ask a friend, but," she paused briefly, then added softly, "I'd rather ask you." There it was. Simple. Honest. Not a tease, not a game, just a small moment of trust wrapped in humor. I hopped over to her side of the fence, and she stepped back to let me through the gate. This time, when our hands brushed as she passed me the box, neither of us pulled away. Her fingers lingered against mine just long enough to make my heartbeat quicken in that quiet, familiar way. Inside, the evening light filtered through her windows, painting everything in warm orange tones. As I lifted the box and carried it upstairs, I could feel her eyes on me, not appraising, but present, connected. When I came back down, slightly out of breath, she handed me a glass of cold lemonade and shook her head, smiling. "You really are strong," she said softly. This time, there was no teasing edge. Just warmth. I smiled back. "You really know how to keep me coming over here." She stepped closer, her shoulder brushing mine as she laughed. And in that quiet, golden moment, surrounded by the soft hum of a settling evening, it was clear, whatever had started as a playful challenge had grown into something real, steady, and beautifully unexpected. If you enjoyed this slow burn age gap romance, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Speech balloon and tell me in the comments, would you have accepted her teasing challenge that night?